The Holy Gospel according to Mark. Glory to you, O Lord. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be made well and live." So Jesus went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" Jesus looked all around to see who had done it, but the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in to where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. Jesus strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and he told them to give her something to eat. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. It was a quiet morning at the Cleveland Clinic, and I was near the end of my overnight on-call shift as I made my way to visit the family of a patient who had just died. Now, it was also at this point that I got trapped in an elevator for the second time in my life, a not very pleasant experience. Now, it's not like my delay was going to change the outcome of this particular patient visit, but the claustrophobic experience that felt like an eternity, although that was probably less than 5 minutes, already had me frazzled as I stepped off the elevator into the ward where the patient's family was waiting for me. There were maybe 4 or 5 of them gathered, including the man's wife and stepchildren, when I walked into the room. After I introduced myself as the chaplain on call, it was clear that this wasn't exactly a bereavement visit, or at least not yet. As I sat there and talked with the family and did a great deal of listening to their stories, it wasn't lost on me that they continued to speak about their spouse and parent and loved one in the present tense. Because the doctor had not yet come, he was not officially pronounced dead yet. We need verification, they kept saying. Holding out hope for a miracle, the man's wife kept repeating. Up against real-life stories like this one, it can be difficult to hear stories in the Gospels of miraculous healings. And these stories are miraculous. They're beautiful and profound stories. 12 years. That's how long the woman with hemorrhages had suffered, isolated from her community, all of her resources and the medical knowledge of her day, exhausted, exasperated, and out of options. She makes a desperate attempt. If I can just touch his clothes. 12 years. That's how old Jairus' daughter is. We don't know the details of her condition or how long she's been sick, but at only 12 years of age, she's already at the point of death. If the woman with hemorrhages had spent all that she had with what little she had, then surely Jairus, a leader of the synagogue and a man with great privilege and resources and prestige, had spent even more. Exasperated and out of options, he finds himself no better off than this other woman. Two very different people in different situations, both desperate and seeking healing at a point where there doesn't seem to be any reason left to hope. When death is lurking and when 12 long years have passed with no answers, turning to the one last place they can think of for help. Who among us wouldn't try every last option available? I think that desperation makes the experience of healing for these two people, when it does come, even more profound. When all hope seems to be lost, Jesus steps in and makes a long-suffering woman well again. And when Jairus' fear comes true, when Jesus' delay costs his daughter her life, even in the face of laughter, Jesus orders her to get up. And immediately she does. The stories of the healing of the woman with hemorrhages and the raising of Jairus' daughter are what we might think of as completed miracles. But what about the incomplete miracles? Like my experience of sitting with the grieving family when the doctor finally comes to pronounce their spouse and parent dead. We know incomplete miracles all too well. We all know people who have lived with untreatable illness. We have all lost loved ones and not seen them brought back to life in this world. We know incomplete miracles. So why could there not be just one relatable story in our Gospels of a person who died and was not healed, or who was sick, or who died and was not raised, and who was sick and was not healed? What promise do healing stories, miraculous as they are, hold for us in these moments? It's easy to fall into the dangerous trap when talking about healing stories in the Gospels, I think, of putting our focus more on the physical cure. A trap because I don't think it's really the point. And dangerous because it only leads us to wonder why miracles and healings like that don't seem to happen anymore. Instead, in this pair of healing stories, one on top of the other, the emphasis seems to be much more on what the healings mean. Jairus is deeply grieved over the very real possibility of losing his daughter, of being separated from his family. The woman with hemorrhages is exasperated, having exhausted every attempt for medical treatment for a condition that is only getting worse, leaving her as an outcast and cut off from her own community. When Jesus heals them, yes, he does cure them physically, but more importantly, he also restores them to community. And that's what healing stories in the Gospels all come down to. Restoration to community. And the promise of life going forward from that moment. To borrow a phrase from the world of improv theater, we might say that these healing stories are about yes and. Yes, a girl is raised from the dead, and she is restored to her family. Yes, a woman is healed of 12 long years of bleeding, and she is called daughter, sent forth in peace and reunited with her community. So what of the incomplete miracles then? Where is the healing and the promise for the family of the spouse and parents finally pronounced dead? Last week, the miracle wasn't so much that Jesus calmed the storm. The miracle was that Jesus was present in the boat with his disciples in the midst of it all. This week, I think something similar is happening. The miracle isn't the medical cure. The miracle is the presence of the community made well and whole by Jesus. The miracle is in the community that surrounds us, that supports us, that keeps us going forward no matter what. Yes, Jesus did complete many miracles in the pages of the Gospels, and we know where this story is going. Jesus himself would enter fully into loss, suffering, rejection, all the way to the cross. Through the cross, God knows well the pain of incomplete miracles. And we know that even there, God is with us. And through the resurrection, Jesus promises the completion of incomplete miracles. The story of these two healings, leading up to the cross and resurrection at the culmination of the gospel, teaches us in this world of now and not yet that God's promises still prevail. Community will replace our isolation. Abundance, not scarcity, will be a reality. Miracles that are incomplete will be completed. And even in the face of death, God brings new life to us and to all of creation.